In recent years, there's been a big increase in the number of Americans who are receiving food stamps. And the public is evenly divided as to what's causing this. 43% say easier government rules, 49% say it's tough economic times. Still, 71% say it's very important that Americans are required to support themselves if they're able to do so. There's a lot of feeling that perhaps it's too easy to get some of the means-tested benefits that are available from the government. On the other hand, 42% of Americans say it is very important that policies are put in place to reduce the gap between rich and poor. Here to discuss this with me is Senator Bernie Sanders, an independent from Vermont, and he's a member of the Senate Budget Committee. And Senator, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Let's start with this talk about food stamps. The House has passed a bill without including any funding for it. 50% of Americans say that it's too easy to get food stamps. What's causing this concern?
Well, as you know, since the Wall Street collapse in 2007, the middle class has been rapidly disappearing. And I think, as you know, we have 46 million people living in poverty. We have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth. The minimum wage has not kept pace with inflation. So you have many millions of people working 30, 40, 50 hours a week. You know what? They're still living in poverty. So it is my own view that in our great nation, we want to create the millions of jobs that we need right now, but we also want to make sure that people in this country don't go hungry. And I'm sure, as you know, most of the people receiving food stamps are families with kids and senior citizens. So the main goal, to my mind, is to revitalize the economy, to create the millions of jobs we want, to raise the minimum wage so that people have work and decent income, and then they don't need government assistance.
Right now, the polls show that only about 1 out of 3 Americans think the economy is fair to the middle class, something I'm sure you would agree with. But a larger number say it's fair to low-income Americans. Why are people feeling squeezed, not just upset at those who earn a lot more money, but people are feeling squeezed from below?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't know the full answer to it. But I think if you ask people, is it appropriate, is it fair, that we have the most unequal distribution by far of wealth and income of any major country on earth. And what we have right now is the top 1% owns 38% of the wealth. Do you know what the bottom 60% own?
Tell me.
2.3%. You tell that to the American people. That the middle class is disappearing. Many of our jobs are going to China. Wages are not keeping pace with inflation. Gap between the very, very rich and everybody else is growing wider. The wealthy now, because of Citizens United, are able to put hundreds of millions of dollars into political campaigns to elect their candidates. I think most people say, well, that's not fair. That's not what America is supposed to be about.
Now, we've talked about some of these perceptions. You mentioned that jobs should be available to create a middle-class lifestyle. Yeah. That if you work hard, you should be able to have that lifestyle, something most people would agree with. Why is there such a belief, then, that the government is not focusing on jobs and instead is focusing on either handouts for people lower end?
I don't use the word handouts.
Okay. Whether you use the word or not, that's the way people see it. Right. And at the other end, they see the crony capitalism.
Well, first of all, in terms of federal programs, we have the highest rate of childhood poverty. I just mentioned that.
Right.
I do not believe the American people want to see our kids go hungry.
Absolutely not.
We have cut back on the Meals on Wheels program, which provides nutrition for fragile senior citizens who can't leave their homes. Now, I'm chairman of the committee that deals with it. You know what? I don't think the American people want that either. But in terms of jobs, I think the criticism is right. We have got to be sitting down and figuring, as a Congress, how do we create the millions of jobs we desperately need? You know, Scott, the newspapers will tell you that unemployment is 7.6%, the official unemployment. Real unemployment, as you probably know, counting those people who have given up looking for work and are working part-time, is close to 14%. It is a tragedy. It is higher for people of color, higher for younger people. We need to create millions of jobs. What I have strongly supported, and gets very little resonance from my Republican friends, is rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. That's roads, bridges, tunnels, rail system. We can create millions of jobs if we just do that.
When you talk about new programs for infrastructure to create jobs, and you talk about, you correctly said, people don't want the poor or the young or disadvantaged or vulnerable people to go hungry. Are there any areas that we should be cutting back? I mean, most Americans also say they want to see government spending cut. They want to see reining in of spending. What would you cut?
Oh, there are a lot of areas. I mean, we are spending now almost as much in terms of military spending, almost as much as the rest of the world combined.
Right.
And I think most people, I don't know what your polling shows, but in my state, I think people say, wait a second. You know, when kids can't afford to go to college, when people can't afford prescription drugs, is it appropriate for us to be spending almost as much as the rest of the world? So I think military spending is one area. I think there's a lot of waste in government in general. But I'll tell you, it's not just the spending aspect. When 1 out of 4 major corporations pay 0 in federal income taxes, when you have companies like General Electric making billions of dollars a year in profit, when you have oil companies making huge amounts of money, and in any given year they pay nothing in federal income taxes, ask your people in your polls how they feel about that.